Good afternoon. And since this segment is called Stirring Up Our Gifts, can we stir up a little more love for Ruth and the delivery that she just gave us? I am honored and grateful to be able to stand here and speak before you today. And I want to thank the Carolina Hunger Initiative, and in particular, I want to thank the folks at No Kid Hungry and Helen and Andrew for inviting me here. And one of my gifts is advocacy. And I just want to remind you all that during the pandemic, we said that our frontline workers, which included our child nutrition assistants and specialists, were heroes. And we use that term every day, and while others were staying home, they were there, they were out in the communities, they were delivering the meals that we want to see to give to kids. And it's something that here in our own community, in that first year of the pandemic, we delivered more than 1 million meals over summer and over the school year, right, to students and their families through the efforts of our child nutrition specialists and, let's be clear, in order to get them there, our bus drivers as well. Can we give them a big round of applause? Here. That's one of the many reasons that I stand here today and want to advocate for you for no-cost meals for all. And we have to understand, right, that if I'm going to sit here and tell you a story about it being an essential school supply, as we know with our transportation workers, if you can't get a kid to school, the school supply isn't going to do any good sitting at home, right? And as we know as educators, if you can't get a kid to school or a kid is too hungry to think or learn, then the result is going to be the same. And so we need to make sure, as we're talking about no-cost meals for all, that we're also talking about what it's going to take to make sure that we have people who can cook, prepare, serve, clean up, and deliver them. And that's got to be an essential part of this message. Now, I'm here, my story that brings me here, perhaps like many of you, was an experience, right, related to an abnormal day, an unusual day, a hurricane. The largest natural disaster in American history, prior to Sandy, prior to Katrina, and some of you may not know this, was Hurricane Andrew in South Florida. I was 12. My mom was a school principal. It literally ripped through our communities and destroyed schools and homes, leaving an area that was once thriving literally demolished. But as leaders, and you all know and understand this, the work still goes on. And while having to deal with not having a place ourselves, my mom still had to be that school leader and show up for the kids at a space that literally did not exist. Schools weren't open, and so, needing all the help she could get, she brought me along to help pass out the food and materials from FEMA to those families. And understanding what it's like for a family who's lost everything, to have someone provide you with sustenance for a day, and to see the look and appreciation in their eyes as a thank you for help is life transforming. And when you hear this, or perhaps you've experienced it on your own, we know that hurricanes have come to North Carolina, no one bats an eyelash. They say that's the right thing. That's what we should do every day to help neighbors in need. And that sentiment lasts a week, maybe two, but then the cleanup begins, the rebuilding starts, we go back to our daily lives, and we forget about all of those who still need that basic sustenance. And as an educator, I see that every day in my classroom. And you better believe it makes a difference in terms of attention span, in terms of performance, in terms of how students even interact with one another, whether or not they know they're going to get a meal that day. And when we talk about equity and we talk about opportunity gaps, this seems to me, at a fundamental basic level, the equity issue that we need to address. We know the demographics. We collect them. We know the makeup of students who are not able to be provided for from their own families who are looking to schools to do this. And yet, we continue to place barriers. And some think that's okay. And yet I would ask anyone who perhaps is of that philosophy to remember back to what Ruth was just talking about, and it seems perhaps ages ago, but it's still here and with us, the pandemic. Think about those first few days when nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew, could you even leave your home or go outside? And yet, everyone knew, I've got to get a meal somehow. And some perhaps had enough to stay in, but some ventured out to the grocery stores, and others called, right, for meals. But the only way they were fed is because others were out there working in those grocery stores. Others were out there cooking those meals. Others were out there delivering those meals when they were just as scared and afraid. Just like our kids and their families are scared and afraid to know where their next meal is going to come from and to what impact that is going to have on them academically, socially, emotionally, and economically. What choice does a family make? And so I want to put it to you all to say, this isn't a cure for an uncurable disease, for an unknowable pandemic. We know the path. Heck, we've seen it lived. We saw the USDA step in an emergency situation and say, ta-da! We can do this. Here you go, larger reimbursement rates, we'll get you. It's free. We know this can be done because there are already 3 states, California, Maine, and Colorado, who have already passed statewide legislation that will make no-cost, free meals available for all passed. That's right. And there were 4 others who at least extended the provisions that were provided by the federal government this year. And I do give North Carolina credit for at least saying those who are on reduced lunch would be able to get free meals for this year at all. We're trying, but there's a lot more that we need to do and go. And that may seem daunting, but it actually isn't. $93 million is an estimate of what it would cost in the budget. We have a $3 billion surplus just this year alone. And a budget of more than $30 billion, that's 0.3% to say every kid who's a public school student in North Carolina gets fed. Seems like a no-brainer. But people might say, it's far more complicated. There's a lot more that needs to go into this. So, you can start locally, right, even if you're thinking globally. Even before the pandemic, one of my gifts, again, I said, is advocacy. I've worked, right, to raise wages of classified workers across our district, and I'm proud to stand in support with our administration who's done that, giving the highest paid wages for bus drivers just recently announced in the news, and we're going to do the same for our school nutrition assistant. And I stand as someone who, even before the pandemic began, working, and you may not know this, that your school nutrition contracts come up for review, and for their years, writing into our contract that we were going to start a pilot for free breakfast in our community. And I don't take credit for that. I got that as a parent when I sent my daughter to a neighboring school district where they already had breakfast, and I was like, what? How can this be possible in a neighboring district and not in Chapel Hill? That's crazy. But it's an equity issue. And it comes back to, if you think about this, we know there is federal law that says if you're stuck on a plane for more than a couple of hours, you have to get fed. But we also know that many people never, ever get on a plane, including our students. Funny how that works. Those who have get a law that ensures that you get fed. Those who may have not, even though they're compelled to go to each of our schools for 180 days a year, aren't getting what they need, which is food. And so I want to close by suggesting to you, you could talk about the economics that would help our school districts, right, with eliminating debt and having to track it down. You could help our workers talk about how you could move through lines faster and you wouldn't have to have all the reporting requirements. But at the end of the day, and I thank you all for being here, at the end of the day, what I believe drives us all is, regardless of what faith or background we come from, is that this is a moral issue. And it is the moral issue of our time. Whatever your politics are, left, right, middle, something else, indifferent, Think of your own families, your own kids, nieces, nephews, or when I say kids, think of those kids you see in your school building every day. Do you want to wake up and tell them, no, I can't feed you today? I don't think so, and none of us do either. And so we need together to come together and to work with one another across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion to make sure that no cost meals for all is something that isn't that we're reading about in other states. It's something that's happening in North Carolina. Thank you very much.